Good afternoon. Welcome to Biden Time. I'm Christian Bladt, joined by the one, the only Tamra Brown. You know, you're probably not the only one. You're
No,
our
there's a
only.
few.
There's got to
There's a
be
few.
there's probably many actually. I
Mhm.
mean, you're probably Hey Tamra on social media because there was a Tamra Brown already. I'm now realizing that, but you're our only. You're the only one we care about. The other ones, please, we have no time for them on this show. Tamra, hope all's going well. We do this show very sporadically now, and sometimes the sporadic nature comes right when you can't do it anyway. So it's been a while, but thank you for being with us today. We were just talking before we got started, and we usually try and have fun with this show and take a very lighthearted approach, and we even squeeze in jokes a lot of the time. So, what would be a more appropriate show for us to handle than Roe versus Wade and the future of abortion and contraception, contraceptive rights, women's rights, and everything that stems from it? I think we're the show for that, right, Tamara?
Kind of an obscure topic. People don't usually
Yeah.
have an
No,
opinion on
nobody's
abortion.
nobody's talking about it right
Mhm.
now. Um, so yeah, and this was something that it's sort of when the news broke that there was a draft had been released by a still unknown source within the Supreme Court of a decision that would overturn Roe versus Wade. But the world and social media being the way in which we get information, it was not entirely accurate. And so I was coming out of a movie, and someone I was with told me, is like, oh, they overturned Roe versus Wade. Now that could very well be what happens, but I'm like, really? It's just looking at these updates on my phone. I didn't have no LA Times update, no. And then you look, oh, okay, I see what happened. So this was just one of those ones where I'm like, wow, that's crazy. And it's still, you know, say what you will, it's still surprising, to say the least. When you first heard about the draft of this decision, so it's very specific to say that this isn't the decision. John Roberts, among others, have said that that's not necessarily, I guess that this is what happens with the decisions a lot of the time. They kind of, it's like, passing notes around amongst friends. It's like, take a look at this, or, anybody who's ever written a script or a book or anything, you have some friends look at it. In this case, you're setting policy for the country, and you're like, oh, what do you other 8 geniuses think about this? So, when did you first hear that this had come out, and what was your reaction first, Tamara?
When? I'm not sure. Last week, whenever
Yeah,
whenever it was, but since then I've learned that, I guess this is not the first leak. This has
yeah.
happened before. It's just that this is the first one that anyone really cares about. We weren't too up in arms when there was a leak regarding you know, uh credit card interest policies or
By the way,
whatnot.
speak
So
for yourself. Somebody
um,
on this show was very, I spent weeks talking about it, but
I had a
anyway, yes,
special Tuesday night, special Biden time just to,
we
yeah.
did.
So it's not that this is unprecedented. It's interesting because we don't know if it was a Republican staffer or a Democratic staffer. People are speculating both ways because that leaked the draft. People are speculating it was out of Alito's office, and it could have been a Democratic staffer who wanted to sort of alert the presses of what was coming, so that public opinion could be heard. Some are saying that it is a Republican staffer that could have leaked it because of the fact that they suspect maybe some not even they suspect that the conservative justices weren't in agreement over it. So this, a Republican possibly leaked it in order to um, in order to unite whatever the conservative justices' opinion might be. So we don't know who leaked it.
Yeah, and I'll just interject that I had heard a theory from somebody smarter than me that it also could have been, I'm using air quotes, of leaked as kind of a trial balloon. Be like, well, how are people going to react to this? And I mean,
Mhm.
not by any of the justices, but whoever, sort of a similar decision from what you're saying, that could be someone on the Republican side. So yeah, it seems like it is a very calculated move, but you can do a list of why either side would want to do this, and you could
And
convince
I
either of them. Yeah,
and I think it's important to note too that conservative media is focusing on the leak more
yeah,
so than talking about the issue of overturning Roe v. Wade. And the reason that that is because even red states, public opinion is the majority of Americans are in favor of abortion rights. The majority of Americans don't want full restriction on abortion. So that means that even red states are largely, in favor of they don't want to completely uh, restrict abortion rights. So that's why conservative media, rather than talking about those issues, um, which would polarize the Republican Party, they're just focusing on the leak and who is this, and how can we spin this to blame liberals or something like that. But yeah, the fact of the matter is that it could potentially be a good thing that it was leaked because when those conversations are being had and maybe justices can see that even their party is, well, I mean, I don't think it's news to them that the Republican Party is even, I mean, it just, the reason that this is so complicated is that even people who are pro-life, people who are staunchly pro-life are a spectrum of beliefs on the subject. They're, some people say abortion should be banned except in instances of rape and incest. Some people believe it should be banned except in the instances of when the mother's life is being threatened, when it's a medical issue. Some people believe it should completely be banned in all instances, always. Then there's
yeah.
debate on at what point in the pregnancy it should, there should be okay, well, up until 8 weeks or something like that. And so it's that, since people who are on one side of the issue, pro-life, can't even agree on, any sort of legislation on it. That's what makes it so complicated to put any type of decision on it. So it's just way too many moving parts, Christian.
Right. And no, I agree. And I also I think that what you find just sort of conversationally, not people speaking publicly nor public figures, is that even people who are pro-life in their own life don't feel that they are in a situation where they can dictate that everyone needs to feel that way. And I think the majority of Americans, I like to think, have a belief set that they don't feel need to be what everybody believes on any issue, you know. I'd like to think that. I mean, except for maybe that we should all hate the Yankees. But other than that, I think everybody, is like, hey, this is just who I am. I'm just going to feel the way that I do. But I mean, just in terms of, just in my personal life, even people that I've known who have said that they would say that they're pro-life. It's not, they're not crusaders for it. It's not a cause. And a lot of,
But
having
but
worked
then
in
you live in a blue state and work
well,
in a blue industry. And
except that I did work for a number of years in conservative talk radio.
mm,
So I did know a lot of people. And the surprising thing was, big secret, how few of them actually went to church, despite things that they might say. Just it's just not a big part of their life.
mhm.
Uh, Somebody I'm thinking of right now who I don't know if they go to church now. They certainly didn't then, and the way that they they write about it, uh, I think that. I think that it's interesting, how people kind of can reinvent themselves. But
Are
yes,
you talking about
living in
Donald Trump?
yes, yes, Junior, actually, big surprise. I know. And, also, I think this is a perfect opportunity to somebody that is much more handsome than Donald Trump Jr. is, or Eric. I'm not gonna, look. I'm gonna be honest. I'd rather look at Ivanka than Scott, but I love Scott all the same. But Scott Moore, thank you for joining us.
Yeah,
We've been spending about 10 minutes talking about a very lighthearted, easy topic: abortion, Roe
of
versus
course.
Wade, and the
This
Supreme
is,
Court
Kind of
lead.
an obscure topic, Scott. I'm not
Yeah,
sure
it
if you've
is,
heard much about it,
I
but
know I
you
should have
no,
probably
I should
don't
have
have an
asked you to read
opinion
up
yet.
on it. I know no
I,
one's talking about it right now,
I don't,
and look,
yeah.
I think we've got I think we've got a good couple of points from our friend Sam Whitfield in the chat. He's very pro-life, government-wise. He thinks it's a states' rights issues, and I do think a lot of people feel that way. And he says that his pro-life stance has nothing to do with religion. Yeah, I completely understand. I think that there's a lot of reasons. Look, I've always been pro-life in my own personal life, and been with women who have had to plan B, which is something we'll talk about, was kind of a convenient development. There's a word I'm looking for that I'm not finding. And but then of course in my own personal life, the first time I heard my son's heartbeat, when he was, I don't know, a few months in the womb, I was like, thought about it a little differently, but I wouldn't, I haven't had to make any decisions like that, and I certainly wouldn't tell anybody else what to think. But it certainly gave me an occasion to go like, oh, okay. So it's something that I listen to people talk about, and I fully understand why some people feel that it's so important to let people know that they're pro-life. And and then we live in a time where if somebody has one of these opinions, either side, that you don't like, you can just mute your interactions with them, because we don't really see people in real life as much as we used to, not even because of the pandemic. It's just the way it is. So it's a lot easier. But Scott, I wanted to kind of bring you in and get your thoughts sort of on the leak. We kind of talked about, there's
Hmm.
two theories as to why
Hmm.
Democrats would leak it and why Republicans would leak it. And both are very credible. And there's also the idea that maybe both a Democrat and both a Republican are like, well, we both want this to get out for completely
Right,
different reasons. Let's team
right.
up. What are your thoughts though when you heard about it, and sort of we've had about a week to think about this, even though it's still just a draft that's out there. What are some
Hmm.
of your thoughts, Scott?
I mean, look, it's a dangerous precedent, and we've talked about this just in the past in general. The Supreme Court kind of becoming more politicized, and over the past couple years now, since now you can just get a Supreme Court justice by the barest of majorities without a filibuster. So now it's become such a huge nuclear thing for each side to be able to change the trajectory of the Supreme Court. And, from going back the past 40 years, this has been something that the Republicans have focused more on, to their credit, than the Democrats, on making sure they got the right judges in, and to make sure that they shaped the court in the image that they wanted. And the Roe v. Wade case in itself has always sort of been a weak case, as far as a an answer, like, not politically, but with the outcome that they wanted, with the
You're
actual
talking about it
judicial.
as a legal case.
As a
The case
legal case,
itself
it's
is
always been a
actually
little
not a
bit
strong case.
shaky.
Yeah.
And you know Democrats, or those that were pro-choice back in the 70s, should have followed up at the time, and we've been reading about this now, and codified it as a nationwide law, and not just depended on this court win, because this is something that now has been focused on by the pro-lifers for the past nearly 50 years, and chipping away, which they've done, as much as they could throughout the years. And now it's too late to be able to get this codified nationwide. And the next thing that could happen politically, potentially, is Republicans will try to do it again, and they'll try to remove the filibuster for this and make it illegal nationwide. And that could be the next step as well. I think it's a dangerous precedence, even however weak this court case was, to strip away rights. There are certain things that I believe are not state issues when it comes to rights of people, this being one of them, marriage equality being another one of them, that are not up to states. It should not be up to states to decide something to make it difficult, because now you could have a state that's going to make it a criminal offense for a woman to go across the border to
Yeah,
its
which I wanted to
neighboring
get to in a
state.
second. Yeah, go ahead.
So there's a lot of things that I feel in this case that are definitely not a state issue. This is a federal issue, and it should have been handled at the time as a federal issue. And I believe it's going to set a very dangerous precedence for our country over the next year or so. As this, if this leak isn't, does turn out to be that's how they end up voting. I also think it's dangerous that the leak got out as well too. It takes away the ability for justices to be able to have these what they think are confidential discussions before they vote on something as monumental as a case like this. And if this leak occurred, what's to say that's not going to happen again? And the issue that we now see too is the Supreme Court has nobody really overseeing it. This is a court that you get a lifetime job and you have nobody overseeing you, whereas the executive and the legislative have a lot of oversight in those areas. You don't see that in the Supreme Court side, and that's dangerous. There is nothing to hold anybody accountable. It would be very difficult to prosecute the leaker when they find it out. It makes it very difficult to have justices recuse themselves from cases, which they might, because nobody is above them to hold them accountable. So it's also showing now in our modern day how fragile really our entire democracy is. It's held on very thin, shaky ground, and it's not good. Any of this, from the leak to turning rights back, even though this was a weak legal case, to a lot of these other things that could happen on the legislative side if this does indeed fall, like it looks like it will, when they actually send out their final vote later this summer. So it's not good all around.
And to your point about some things shouldn't be states' rights, I mean, I think if everything was left up to states' rights, and there were 50 different opinions on everything, I think that as fractured as this country might be now, I think that we wouldn't have been able to survive if we weren't able to have things like that. Also, do you wonder if in 2022 we would still have separate drinking fountains and things like that if everything was left up to states' rights? So there are times where the elected officials have to act like, well, I think we know what's best, and unfortunately they do it too many times about things that aren't important. So when it is important, there's always concern about that. Sort of stemming from this story are a lot of things that we've heard about. Scott, you referenced one thing, which is this idea that certain states, Texas being one of them, if a woman was to leave, this is just, let's just be honest and upfront that this is just a proposal. This is not something that's like, yep, they're voting on it now. But the idea that if a woman were to leave the state to get an abortion, they would want to make them take a pregnancy test when they were leaving, and, make sure that they weren't pregnant before they left for another state. And I always find it interesting when the Republican/conservative side that is supposed to be the ones arguing about less government and having government be less involved in our lives. And I don't want the government to tell me that I need to get a shot to go on a go to a concert or wear a mask on an airplane. Oh, but you can go ahead and test my girlfriend before she leaves the state. So, there's a lot of government busybodies is a euphemism that I'll use, but there's things like that, proposals already coming around of, outlawing Plan B, which I referenced earlier, which is the morning after pill. And there's a Senate candidate in Arizona who has called for condoms to be banned in all states. And I decided not to make a joke about it. But of all the things, of all the things, that's the one that I felt like I could make a joke for.
It already is there.
I wish somebody
would.
It.
Why?
Yeah, I wish somebody would enforce that in the porn industry. That's what I'm trying to say. But I and then also in Idaho, similar ideas about Plan B and even IUDs. So I think that this is one of those things that, once you start to pull away at some of this, then it's like, great, shouldn't we go for anything. And look, Sam, I completely agree with you. This idea of being tested before you left the state, how would the logistics of that? I think it's far fetched. I do too, but it's like if you're starting to have that conversation, then what is it that they're going to be okay about? You know, the
Mhm.
idea that you know, you can't go to different states, you can't leave, and you know, I'm talking about this all, and this is in the conversation stage, and these are dangerous conversations to have. You know, banning certain forms of contraception other than for, you know, if say they're not safe, you know, something like that. Sure,
I
something's not
mean,
effective. Go
the
ahead, Tamara. Sorry.
benchmark of Roe v. Wade originally was about privacy. It was about a
Yeah.
person's
Mhm.
right to privacy. And so as Roe v. As they're chipping away at these things, they are also, I mean, it's as if you can say that they go hand in hand. So, you know, if you're trying to, you know, the stricter you are on trying to prevent abortion, the harsher you are on eliminating privacy, and which, as you just said, Christian, goes against like fundamentally what Republicans say that their
Mhm.
party is based on is autonomy and government getting out of our lives, but yet
Yeah.
we're chipping away at rights to privacy. And as I said before Scott joined, since even pro-lifers are not united on their beliefs in pro-life, there's such a spectrum of okay, it's okay up until this point, or it's okay unless it's in this circumstance and things like that. Since there cannot be, every single aspect of this is so completely complicated, to put any sort of legislation on it, ruling on it, is just trying to simplify a very complicated issue that's not really going to, there's always going to be aspects of it that even people are pro-life are not, it's gone too far, or it hasn't gone far enough. And like I said, I think that the reason that conservative media is focusing more on the leak rather than talking about the issue of restricting abortion rights is because, you know, uh, even in red states, there are a lot of uh, the majority of citizens are in favor of some sort of access to contraceptives, some sort of access to, um, you know, health, reproductive health care. So it's just not easy to put any type of one size fits all ruling on this, and it's just going to affect other areas of our lives. It's going, any type of legislation that does go into place is just going to set bad precedents that are going to affect, rights, all kinds of rights, and other areas of our life.
Yeah, and I've got a headline up from this one's from the Daily Mail, but you've probably seen similar headlines. A majority of Americans believe overturning Roe versus Wade will also lead to more restrictions on birth control and family planning choices, and most want a federal law protecting abortion, according to a new poll. Now, obviously, you could have a poll that says something different, but that's the poll that I saw, and I think that the idea that abortion is universally considered to be, I mean, anyone who's ever spoken to anyone who, you know, I mean, I think that most Republicans and conservatives probably do have someone in their life that had an abortion, but for
Most
their
people
choice.
do. I mean, that's
Yeah.
one of the things, is that if
Well, yeah,
this
that's what it,
were
yeah,
not
exactly.
such a taboo topic, I mean, I kindly remind people who are pro-life a lot that it's like, I guarantee that there's somebody in your life who you love and respect, who either has done this or is in favor of the right to do that, and you're just not aware of it because it's such a taboo topic. You
Yeah.
you know, you live in a community where this person would be shamed if the truth was out, and it's like, even people who are pro-choice, it's a difficult, choosing an abortion is a difficult decision. There's not a single person who's trying to argue that it's not. It's an extremely difficult decision. It should be rare. It should be, not something that should be taken lightly, but it is a right that should be afforded to people in a certain position. I mean, the most people likely to receive, the most likely to get an abortion is a woman who already has 1 or 2 children and already and is struggling to take care of those children statistically. So,
Yeah.
it's the image of who people think are getting an abortions. There's just so much misinformation out there, and then also the effect that everybody, somebody who's very simplistically is like, well, it's murder. I believe that it's murder. Okay, I'm not gonna, there's nothing that I can say that's going to argue against that. But if that's the fact, it's like, restricting abortion does not eliminate abortion. It's still going to happen. Only now it's going to be dangerous and likely the mother's going to die too. So you're ending 2 lives instead of 1. So it's just
Right, exactly. I mean, the lawmakers and Supreme Court justices involved, anyone in their lives or associates, if were they to need to have an abortion, they could of course get one. But yeah, and I think that there was it wasn't a slogan, but there sort of was this. A lot of Democrats were saying that abortion should be, what was it? It should be rare, safe, and legal. I think were the 3 that you would hear. And rare it's a subjective thing. But there is, to what Tamara said, this notion that people think like, oh, it's people. Well, women make this decision in a very cavalier manner, and yes, of course, there have to be some that use it as instead of any other form of birth control. And that's what happens when something is this, when you have a right to something, is that you can use it how you choose. So but I think that for the most part, the people saying that is an easy decision are people who are opposed to it. I don't know that people will say like, oh, it was the easiest decision I ever made.
can I want to
Yeah, go ahead.
address Sam's last comment here too.
Yeah, sure. Let me put it up on the screen. I definitely wanted to. Oh, not that one. This one is the one you're talking about, right?
Yeah,
All
all of
these.
these arguments about dangerous conversations are the same ones that the anti-jab people were talking about a year ago. I mean, I would agree, except the difference is that people who are people. It's about the arguments you could say were the same because about body autonomy, but the difference is that the virus affects not just you. If you get affected if you come down with COVID, it affects your community. It affects those around you. It affects the family. Abortion is strictly an individual's decision,
Sure.
and it only affects an individual. It does not affect. It's not going to have the same spreading effect that a virus does. So I'd say that that's the
Yeah,
difference.
And go ahead, Scott. Sorry. Go ahead.
no, that's exactly what I say to people. It doesn't mean that all of a sudden someone else is getting infected with an abortion if someone else has it and they're within 6 feet of somebody. Whereas this affects people and can get people, if you don't get the vaccine, can make people very, very sick.
Right. And over the
spread to other
last
parts
year
that are.
on this show, as we've talked about vaccines and mandates, we, at least, I'll speak for myself. I was very specific in the idea that I never thought that there should be any kind of regulations for things like supermarkets or, there's, essentials. If a private business, as in a stadium or a league or something, decides that people need to be vaccinated to attend events, that's an extra in your life. How much do you want to go to it? Do you want to go to a concert? Do you want to go to an NFL game? Then you would have to get vaccinated. It doesn't seem to be the case anymore, but that was a very real issue a year ago. And I think that I understand where Sam's coming from. But if you were an anti-jab person, then the idea of being anti pro-choice, you can't say anti-pro-choice, but anti-abortion, outlawing it, it's like you should, you can point out the hypocrisy on one side if you feel that that's what there is, but don't make yourself a hypocrite in order to point it out. And I'm not saying that that's what Sam's doing. I'm just saying sort of that's a way that argument can be framed.
If COVID were an illness that only affected you, then there would not have been an issue about whether or not you should get vaccine. The Democratic Party would be like, I mean, it would be better for you if you did, but it wouldn't have been as necessary. I wish I could think of an example of some sort of illness where there's a vaccine for something that is only
Well, yeah, because we have to
or-
get you have to get vaccinated to go to school for for rubella and mumps and polio.
yeah, and
There's
those
so
are
many
all
things that
spreadable diseases
yeah, but
too.
I mean,
So
so but it sort of still makes the point of, both of my kids have those yellow cards with all their vaccinations up to date. So it was
yeah.
just sort of making the point of like, okay, well, if you want to homeschool your kids, then you don't have to get those shots. So yeah, but I think that it makes a point. Keith's dad, who I haven't seen in a while, good to see you, Keith's dad. Roe v. Wade is based on the right to privacy. This isn't really a right listed in the Constitution. No, it falls into the 10th Amendment. I think if it fell into the 10th Amendment in a way that wasn't legally ambiguous, there would have never been the need for the Roe v. Wade decision. I understand your point. I think logically, you're bringing logic into it. And when we talk about politics, Bill O'Reilly used to have the no spin zone. Sometimes politics needs to be the no logic zone. You just have to sort of use a different set of rules and regulations in there. But back to the headline that I showed earlier, I think that the majority of people do feel that there should be a choice for it, whether even if they knew that they would not ever choose for themselves, they still understand there are so many situations, and that really, if it were to become illegal in certain states, the people that will be impacted are the poorest people in those states. I mean, you can't convince me of otherwise, because rich people in those states either can find a doctor who will still do it, or they can leave the state. And I mean, it can't be said often enough. I hear people making that point, and and I think when you start getting into like, well, we want to outlaw this, and what about if we can get rid of Plan B, and even this notion about IUDs, at a certain point, I think that I would be concerned if I was in the Republican Party in any way, that they're getting ready to overplay their hand here, and on the verge of having what'll probably be a very historic midterm elections for Republicans. This is the one way where you can, one, motivate Democrats who usually don't vote, or left-leaning people, younger voters, but then also change the minds of people who are like, I thought I really liked that guy, and then I heard what he had to say about abortion. I'm not going to vote for the other guy, but I'm definitely not showing up to vote for, oh, I don't know, Ted Cruz. Just picking somebody. I don't know. I don't know why. But in terms of, it's obviously it's such an important part, and it's such a big decision for people. But let's talk about it, Scott, in terms of the strategy of it. Do you think that there is sort of too many people on the right that see this as an opportunity to go after way too much, and that is really something that they should be concerned about in terms of getting carried away? Could be good news for Democrats, though.
No, absolutely. I mean, and then it could also just be a wash at this point, because not enough people will go out on the Democratic side in some of these states because of the other issues going on, like inflation, um, and gas prices and other things that may get a majority of people still amped up to vote or not vote. I do think it is an overreach by Republicans, and I think they will sort of rue the day to say they will regret it, in the longer sense, because as we've already seen at the presidential level, they have not been able to get uh, good electoral victories across the board since the 80s. When you only talk about the anomalies of 2004, that's the last time that they've been able to get an electoral actual victory. And even then, it was a sliver, about 100,000 votes, that ended up getting Ohio to George W. Bush in that reelection year. So they're already at a disadvantage when it comes to the presidential level of politics. And, this is a chance where they ostensibly could have a weak incumbent going into 2024, or having weak incumbent of the Democrats being in office if Joe Biden decides not to run again. And now they have a very good shot of losing the presidency altogether in 2024. Now, 2022 was already a tough year when you have a midterm of the party, and that's just historical. If Republicans had won now in 2020, then at the presidential level, they would have likely lost seats in this election too. So there is no difference, but you're right, it would have been more of a route potentially for Republicans this time around, much like the Democrats had in 2018 after Trump's victory in 2016. But it also may not be as much as Democrats hope to if Democrats really do not get out and vote, because a lot of the people that are the most frustrated and upset tend to be younger voters, which are also less likely to go out and vote. So there could be very upset people. There'll be a lot of protests in the summer if this passes, and there definitely will be a lot of emotion. But will those people translate and actually go out and vote is the other question, which tends to happen on the Democratic side. A lot of emotions, a lot of passions, but the younger voters in particular, the ones that are most passionate about it, are the least likely to go out and vote.
Right.
So,
Tamra, oh, sorry. But Tamra, I've heard other people say before, and in fact, I think specifically, articles written that Republicans are counting on people to care more about inflation than abortion. And I think that in terms of something that is an incredibly personal, emotional issue, I think they're discounting how much somebody would care about abortion. And again, even if it's someone who isn't in a situation where they feel like they would need to make that decision, maybe they're older, maybe, but the idea that that it would go away, if a certain way is voted. I don't know. Do you think that specifically men might be discounting just how important it is? This isn't like they're going to care about tax cuts more than child. I don't know, something for kids. You know what I mean?
I mean, again, I think the reason that Republicans are focusing on other issues is because they're aware that their party is not divided. It's not. I mean, if you poll Republicans, the majority are, of course, pro-life, but the majority of Americans. So, like, if the entire United States were to have to vote right now on whether to restrict abortion rights, it would not pass. The majority of Americans are in favor of are in favor of the right to an abortion. So I think Republicans know that even within their party, like I said, there are a significant amount of Republicans who are pro-choice, but the ones that are pro-life, because it's such a spectrum of beliefs on the subject, they know that by taking a strong stance on a specific legislation is not going to do well for them. So they're focusing on other issues. They're focusing on even within this, they're focusing more on the leak than the actual discussion of abortion. So it's just that there's not like a consensus that can be made amongst the Republican Party. So it's just in their better interest to focus on. Why can't we just be talking about vaccines again? That's what they're all.
Right. No, exactly. They definitely want to be able to go back towards that. A compliment from Keith Stad. So of course that will get up on the screen. Agree or disagree, you guys and girls use a bit more common sense than the news. So I like watching, in case you wondered. Yeah, I mean, I think that we're much more reasonable than any news outlet. Let's be honest. And honestly, I think we give much better information. So, but no, we appreciate it.
Thanks to Scott.
And look, and Keith's dad also says he would suspect a majority of Christians, not me, don't care too much and would care more about inflation. 65% of the U.S. as of 2020. Yeah, I just think that it's important to more women than who would say publicly. And I'm not saying it's not important to men. I just think that there are people who are not outspoken about it. Go ahead. Sorry, Tamara.
And just a personal opinion on Christians care, whether they care about the issue or not. Every time I've tried to have a conversation about abortion with somebody that is Christian, heavily religious, they don't want to talk about it. And I personally feel the reason they don't want to talk about it, it's not that they care about inflation more than abortion. It's that they don't want to be backed into the corner of facts about abortion. Facts like the people seeking abortion already have other children. They're not it's not the person that you're assuming that it is. Yeah. Outlawing abortion does not eliminate abortion or, even cut down on the amount of it. If, things like that. They don't want to be backed into that corner, so they just don't even want to have the conversation. It's just simpler to say, I don't believe in it, it's wrong, and to not go into any in-depth into the conversation about it. So that's just my personal experience with talking about it with Christians. So I would wonder that in polling, I would wonder if it's not so much that they care about this issue more than this issue. It's that they just don't want to have to deal with thinking about that issue.
Right. No, exactly. This references something we were talking about earlier. So New York has announced a bid to help pregnant women get terminations. Specifically, New York's governor has asked Congress to repeal the Hyde Amendment that would give New York the funds to take in out-of-state abortion seekers. But then this references something that we were getting at earlier. Texas says it would stop, and it's in capital letters, those who travel out of state if Roe versus Wade is overturned. This is when I would go back to what our friend Sam Whitfield said. How do you possibly stop people from leaving your state for any reason? I mean, just even if we, Keith's dad said something I thought was interesting earlier. I do like that we live in 50 separate countries, like a super strong EU. We're a lot stronger than the EU. I'll give you that. But no, but I mean, like, even if each of these little pockets had their own, government, and you had to change your money just to go into Arkansas or whatever, it's still like, how are you stopping that? How are you telling people you're not allowed to leave? And then
it's toothless. There's no way you
Yeah.
can, because you wouldn't even know that a woman is pregnant at that point in time. Nobody would
Right.
even know.
I feel like, but those types of those are more publicity type
Of course.
Yeah. Agreed.
rulings rather than something that they're actually trying to put into place.
Right, and they know
Yeah.
that it won't stand the test anyways of lawsuits. But it's kind of like the Florida thing with Disney, when then Governor DeSantis can stand up, but are they actually going to get rid of the special district? Is that same thing? It's more, let me show the publicity and show that we're doing all this stuff, but it's really toothless at the end of the day.
Right. No, exactly. And I think that yeah, it's definitely, it's like, when Republicans had the House, Obama was president, Democrats had the Senate, they would vote to repeal Obamacare in the House. I don't know, it seemed like every couple months. And all the Republicans would vote, so there was a small majority, and then the Senate was like, yeah, I know, we're not gonna do anything with that. So you just do it for the show of, like, we did our part, and look, both parties certainly do that. I'm not saying that. It's just, yeah, sometimes you're just doing it for the sake of that.
And I'm sure
What
that's
I
going to happen with this as well. If
Yeah,
abortion is
absolutely.
overturned and Republicans do win the House and the Senate, you'll see over the next 2 years they'll do the same thing, where they'll try to ban abortion nationwide, knowing Joe Biden's going to veto it, but they can go
Yeah.
for the publicity of it in the show, just like when they tried to overturn Obamacare those years. It'll be the same thing.
But just Chuck Schumer's trying to codify a vote on it, even though he knows he doesn't have the votes, and it's more of a symbolic gesture too.
Right.
Yeah. One of the things I wanted to make sure we did talk about before we finished for the day, that the Senate very quickly passed legislation that it's a bill that expands the security for Supreme Court justices and their families in the wakes of, I guess, yes, people showing up outside of Brett Kavanaugh and Justice Alito's homes. And they seem to be, of course, angry protests. As far as I know, and if either of you saw a story that I missed, please let me know. It didn't seem like anyone was being violent or actually doing anything. They were just there to protest. But if somebody was, please say so. Yeah, I mean, I think that Supreme Court justices should certainly have whatever level of security elected officials have, and it does extend to family members for sure. I'm not saying that. And I think, peaceful protests, I never have a problem with. It's just, as soon as something happens outside of any justice's house, then that's when you're just like, well, why do you think it's okay to do that? And I saw somebody make the point of how, I was reading a terrible story about someone who volunteered at, it wasn't Planned Parenthood, but it was a similar organization, an abortion provider in their state. And this person was talking about how they would take the bus there, because if you drove there, they'd write down everybody's license plates and they'd find out where you lived, and they'd go to your house and, the people who worked there, their kids would be, how do you feel that your, parents are murderers, all this stuff. So, you're hearing about this stuff of like following their kids home, showing up at their kids' schools and things like that, following people home. And those are terrible stories. But then that doesn't mean that you then necessarily, to make your point, then harass Brent Kavanaugh's kids. I don't know how old his kids are. That's not the point. It's just more of a hypothetical, so it's like, yeah, I mean, protesting somewhere outside of his house, even, it's fine. Outside of the house, don't go onto the property, don't throw anything, don't light it, any of that. I'm okay with it. But look, I also think that, yeah, take a step. That's a bipartisan bill, the one that I referenced. Both Republicans and Democrats very quickly passed that. I don't know. This doesn't seem crazy to me, Tamra, this idea that no, Supreme Court justices should certainly have some level of protection, not necessarily more than, a president. But what do you think about the fact that this bill was passed so quickly earlier this week?
I don't know. It's hard for me to say, because on one hand, it's like they are, of course, public figures, and as long as people are being peaceful and they're not trying to get onto their property, I mean, that's the same as like the Star Tours here driving through, pointing out celebrities' homes. I mean, it's just like, where
I
a
hate when they
public.
drive by my house. I'm like,
know
I
you
know.
Sorry.
Hello. I'm done
Maybe I'll
taking pictures.
maybe I'll take you off the map.
Thank you.
We'll see. But it's we there's times when public figures, people know where they live, but then at the same time, it's like, yes, they have a right to privacy as well, but then also too, as we were saying earlier, they're not held, because it's a lifetime appointment, they're not held accountable in any way as representatives and senators are. So maybe protesting outside their house is the only way for Americans to hold them accountable. So I don't know. I'm really torn.
What do you think, Scott?
I'm torn too. I mean, we've talked about this before, like when the riots were going on in 2020,
Sure.
and people were going up, even here locally to Los Angeles, to then District Attorney Jackie Lacey's house. It's difficult because there is a right to protest, and it can be a very fine line of being on the sidewalk right in front of somebody's house. And should they have the right to peaceful protest? Yes. On the other hand, in such a charged atmosphere in something like this with abortion, which we know has a history of violence from either side, when it gets to this, will temperatures get so heated that justices do need simple protection? Yes, it's just, again, how far is that line going to go, and what kind of, like you saw when they put up the non-scalable fencing around the Supreme Court, like what measures are they going to take, and is it going to be so extreme that now we're not having the democratic right, again, that's in the Constitution, to protest and the right of assembly? And that's where that fine line is. And so, yes, if it's done for practical purposes to protect them, I understand. But if it goes too far, where's that line going to be to maintain that order, to be able to right to protest? And that's the thing I'm concerned about more than anything.
Yeah, I think obviously the right to peaceful assembly is written. It's one of the foundations the country's built on. But the peaceful part is what I'm always concerned about. And I also wanted to sort of touch on something that I think a lot of people are pointing out, that, and it's something that I've had the thought, well, we wouldn't be in this situation if Ruth Bader Ginsburg had stepped down while Obama was president. However, the other side of that, yes, there's something to be said for that. But of course, everybody expected that we were going to have another Democratic president. But Obama did try to appoint another Supreme Court justice while he was still president. She would have had to step down at, I don't know, many years before she was ready to, I think, is what the point was. It's not really something I had thought about until somebody made the point that they were, the Mitch McConnell-led Senate was not going to be holding confirmation hearings. And it wasn't just because it was 2016. You think that if Ruth Bader Ginsburg was like going to step down in 2015, that McConnell would have been like, well, I mean, the presidential election is not till next year. I mean, we've seen how pliable that belief system is. So, that's a pretty big what if I can see the argument. And look, storage yard resident, are you? I saw you at the beginning. I didn't know you were still there. Are you telling me that Supreme Court justices are above the law? They certainly aren't above the law. But I think that the reason why they get the lifetime appointment, which I can understand the argument against, but is because, it's not something that you're not getting reelected as a Supreme Court justice. You're making decisions based on what you think is right. And then at a certain point you step down, but I don't think that we were saying that they're above the law. I think I'm saying that I understand the need to keep them safe, reasonably. And whether or not the government should provide for that, that's a conversation for someone else. But they can certainly hire security if But I don't know. I don't think that that's at all what we were saying, Scott, because none of us, I think, believe that. But
no,
I don't know. I mean, go ahead. Sorry, what, Scott?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was going to say, I think part of the problem is that there is an issue with them being above the law in the sense, like we just said earlier, they have no checks and balances. They have no oversight. So in a weird way, there is this notion that they don't answer to anybody. And the lifetime achievement or lifetime job achievement has shifted in time, because back in the late 1700s, the average lifespan was 50, 55 years old.
Right.
So when you're appointing somebody, they're there for a few years. And the point of having that lifetime appointment was to take out the politics, surprisingly enough, now in our present world, because they were only supposed to go in, they're going to go in for a few years. And it wasn't like you had to worry about, like you said, them being reelected or reappointed or whatever. They were going to serve, and they were going to probably die within.
Was the lifespan 55 and the 17?
Well, I mean, yes.
I mean, I'd say, yeah. I mean, if you go back centuries earlier, the life expectancy was like 35.
Right,
so,
right. But when you see like a lot of the people, especially the rich, well-to-do folks back at the turn of the century, they still lived into their 60s, 70s. John Adams was the longest lived president for many years, and he was 90 until Herbert Hoover. So actually it's the other way around, but he lived until Ronald Reagan eclipsed that. But the point is that it was a 10 or 15 year appointment that's now turned into, we're now into 30, 35, 40 years. And so the lifetime appointment has shifted it over time, and it's lost what it originally had. And there's been talk even before this about maybe 18-year terms, which again, how would that happen constitutionally, besides increasing the number on the court? But is there a world in which this now is outdated, much like a lot of the times they're saying Justice Alito said that the abortion thing was not originally in the Constitution? Well, there's a lot of things from the turn of the 1700s, the 1800s that were never even thought of back then that are now things today. So you can't really base on something on their thought process, much like saying about the Bible. And that's the same thing. Like what people thought when they wrote the Bible does not pertain to everyday modern life today.
The Constitution is so flawed that they almost immediately put out the Bill of Rights. They're like, oh yeah, there's all the stuff we forgot about.
And amendments. I mean, that's the whole point of doing a constitutional amendment. Those are all things that have been added over time because of different things. As mundane as holding a president to 2 terms. I mean, there were constitutional amendments all the time they're added. So you can't say something from the original time and not say anything else when you add constitutional amendments now. So it doesn't really hold up either.
So I guess something you referenced, whether it's less about personal hopes or preference. Let me ask you first, Tamra, do you think that there will be an effort to try and put more justices on the Supreme Court, which would require getting rid of the filibuster? I think that it is not something that there are the votes for, because the Senate is split down the middle. So I don't think we'll see it, but people have started talking about it again.
Yeah, that's not going to happen anytime soon. That's not. Yeah. It's just not. The Democrats don't have the strength right now or anytime in the near future to do that. It would be not. I'm in favor of that, but I don't think that that's going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, they wouldn't need it technically, but Scott, I think they would actually need to have like 60 seats. They would need to get that many votes, because you're probably going to have a couple of Democrats who are like, I might believe in it, but I can't vote for it if I ever want to get reelected. So you need to really be able to have an actual majority, even though
I'd
again,
say over 60.
You think more than 60? Okay.
Yes, just because of the filibuster. And if you're keeping that in there, you would need a couple. So you could have a couple of them peel away.
Interesting. How long could you
You know-
filibuster to try to stop the filibuster? You know, it's like we want to vote on ending the filibuster. Well, I'm going to read the phone book until then. Sorry, what were you going to say, Tamra?
Hello. So if if there's like some strange, wacky turn of events, and one of the conservative justices actually does, maybe one or two votes against restriction abortion access, then that would be the only scenario I could see where, because then you would have Republicans on board with considering, yes, adding, imposing term limits or adding justices or something like that. So
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, and not necessarily, the good kind of interesting. There's different levels of interesting, but it's
also, I was trying to think of, is there a way, if there was a way that oil companies could profit from abortion, then that's the only way that we're going to just completely, abortions
Well,
for
well, to
every
bring up
corner.
another hot button issue, is there a way
Right.
for Elon Musk to buy the Supreme Court? Because I'm the first one
Sure.
putting that out there as a solution. Now, I don't know how much we would like what he would do with the Supreme Court, but it might be solar powered.
God.
So there could be that. In any case, I'm glad that we were able to have the time to have this conversation. Glad that we were all together. And I'll be traveling throughout May, but we'll be back sometime in June, and hopefully we can all be together and with more lighthearted, fun topics.
Of course.
And Scott, a little belated, but happy birthday! I know you
Thank you
just
very
had
much.
one.
Thank
And
you.
I was thinking of how many years
Yay.
I've known you now, because it goes back to 2016.
Yes,
And I was like, wow,
yes.
I've known a lot of Scott Moore birthdays. I've seen them.
You have.
See them come and pass.
You've seen me age right before your eyes.
Well, you did post a picture. I think it was on May the 4th. It was like from the Skywalker Ranch or whatever. And I was like, oh, that's before I knew Scott.
That is before. You're absolutely right.
It's all right. I'll occasionally post pictures.
I still feel like I look like that. So
yeah.
That's
Oh
why
yeah.
for me.
I feel like you look like it. I just in any case, Scott, if people
Thank
want
you.
to keep in touch with you, if look, Mitch McConnell is kind of begging you to antagonize him on Twitter. Where can people find you? Yeah.
They can find me on Twitter at SMan80. That's SMan80.
And Tamra, which Hey Tamra would you like people to find? Just the TikTok, or do we want them to know where they all are?
Well, TikTok and Instagram are my main social media. I have had several things go viral on Instagram, so I have a bit of a following on Instagram now that I didn't have at the time of our last show. So those are Instagram and TikTok are my main social media. I do not get the same type of love from Twitter, but feel free to follow me there at HeyTamra_.
And Keith's dad says that he loves us and he's glad that he found the channel and look forward to seeing everything you do. Earlier, he talked about how he had fallen behind on Star Trek Picard and he didn't want any spoilers. Don't worry. The makers of that show spoiled it all on their own. I couldn't possibly spoil that show for you. So when you get caught up, you can see our shows, and you've never seen me hate something in the way that I've hated.
Quick question about Picard.
Yes, please.
I'm not usually a tea drinker, but I happened to have a tea. I was like, I'm going to get tea this morning. I opened my cabinet and I had Earl Grey, and I said out loud, Earl Grey, hot.
It's hot. It's the only way to ask for it. Yeah.
That's in Picard?
You know what? At no point in the show did he say that, and that is probably why it suffered. It would have been better if he had. In any case, if you want to see that and everything else, please subscribe to the Blackcast YouTube channel. We did reviews of Marvel's Moon Knight, a couple of shows on the new Doctor Strange movie, so you can find that, the titular Blackcast, and I've got some interviews coming up over the next week, so you'll find it all there. Subscribe, BLADTCAST. Find me on Twitter and Instagram at ChristianDMZ. I'm still not cool enough for TikTok. Just go ahead. Twitter, Instagram, good enough for me. Yeah, me and Scott, we're not cool for TikTok. But I would get it just so that I could follow Tamra. In any case, thanks everybody. Always having a great chat with everyone who was there, and we'll see you next time.